Hi everybody, Kevin Lane here for another Uncle Jonesy's Camera of the Week. And this week we are featuring the Polaroid SX-70 SONAR. That's right. Now this camera was an update of the original SX-70 camera, which came out in 1972. And what a camera that was. I mean, it was amazing. Instant photography had been around for a while. Edwin Land and his Polaroid company had cameras out that would make photographs that would develop in just a few minutes or so. And that was amazing. But the SX-70 was different because you would put a film pack in the camera, then you would look through the viewfinder, you would focus the camera, the lens, you would push the shutter, it would take the picture, and out came a photograph right through this slot, which you would hold in your hands. All you had to do was wait a minute, and the photograph would develop right there in front of you. It was amazing. It was really the height of instant photography. That was a very successful camera and a very good one. They didn't really spare very many expenses with it. But in 1978, they updated that camera to the SX-70 SONAR OneStep. Now, the main update is the fact that this camera is autofocus. That's right. It uses sonar technology. That means it sends out sound from this part right here, which was not on the original SX-70. It goes out to the subject, measures, and it would bounce back. And it would use that, calculate that time that it took for that sound to bounce back to measure the distance between the lens and the subject. And then it would adjust with a motor in there. It would adjust the lens, and your photograph would be in focus. Here, let me show you. I'm going to take a picture of my screen. Right now it looks out of focus, but when I push the shutter halfway down, you come right into focus. Can you hear that? That's the sound of the motor being turning the lens and getting it to the right spot. Amazing, an autofocus camera. Now remember, the SX-70 was a single lens reflex camera. That means that when you look through the viewfinder, you're actually looking through the taking lens. That's pretty cool. But there's more. This camera was essentially a program camera. You could say point and shoot, but it was far better than that. But it was a program camera in that it would calculate the exposure all on its own. You really didn't have to do anything but point and shoot after you focused like that on the sonar. Now, the SX-70 cameras and the sonar, of course, all took the SX-70 film that Polaroid made, which was wonderful film. It had wonderful colors, had its own color palette, and there were photographers out there that used the SX-70 as their medium for art. So they were very sad when in 2008 or so, 2006, 2008, Polaroid announced that they were getting out of the film-making business. And all of that film went away and wasn't available for a while. And all of these wonderful pieces of machinery became useless without the film. Well, the last Polaroid factory, which was in the Netherlands, was purchased by a group of investors, and they called themselves the Impossible Project. And the reason they did that is because by the time they purchased the factory, the film was no longer being made, and most of the raw materials to make the film were no longer available, or in some cases even actually illegal because they weren't environmentally friendly. So they had to reverse engineer the film. I'm sure you know the story if you're into film photography. They reverse engineered the film and came up with something that would work. Not too well, but it did record an image. And then over time they improved it until it became a bit more, well, a lot more reliable. Let's go ahead and give them credit for that. They saved Polaroid photography. And so now these old cameras like the SX-70 and this SX-70 SONAR can still be used because of what the Impossible Project did. Now, a few years ago, they acquired the name Polaroid and turned from the Impossible Project, changed the name of the company to Polaroid Originals. And then just a few months ago, they changed it to just Polaroid. So now it's all under the name of Polaroid, which is really cool. And the film It's not bad. It can be inconsistent, especially the color film, and I'll explain why it's inconsistent in a moment. Some reasons why you might have inconsistencies with the film. And it's a bit more expensive than you would pay, say, for Fuji Instax. With Polaroid originals, and now Polaroid, you only get 8 shots in a film pack, whereas the original Polaroid back in the 1972 through the 90s through early 2000s, those original Polaroid packs, 10 shots a roll, and the cost was a lot less. So what does a pack of Polaroid film cost today? It costs around $19 or so, depending on where you get it. $19 a pack for the SX-70 cameras. Now, later on, they updated this camera to a new kind of camera and new kind of film. I'm talking in the 80s or so, I think, with a higher speed film called 600 speed film. And this camera does not take 600 speed film because the ISO is already set to the camera for the exposure system. Now, I'll tell you about a workaround in just a moment. So this film, about $18, $19 a pack, 8 shots, that works out to about $2.30-something for a photograph. So we'll talk about whether it's worth it or not. But before we get into shooting this camera today, let's get some specifications down. First of all, the lens is a 116 millimeter lens, which for this camera works out to be a normal, what we would say standard focal length, like a 50 millimeter lens on a single lens reflex camera. And it's a glass lens. It is incredibly sharp, incredibly good quality. The exposure information is, let's say, shutter speed goes from the fastest shutter speed, 1/180th of a second, all the way to about 5 seconds and more. I think it can be plus on that. It's the notes I found. And the aperture, the maximum aperture is f8, and it can close all the way down to f90. Yeah, f90. Now, the electronics of this camera choose all of that for you. You don't have to think about that. In fact, you can't control the aperture or the shutter speed. You just go out and shoot. The only control you have over exposure is this wheel right here on top with the white and the black. And right now, in fact, every time you open the camera, like when I close it and then open again, that always defaults to a 12 o'clock position right in the middle. And it's a good thing this is here now, because now today the film is a little bit different from the original film. The original film was an ISO of about 100. All right, not terribly fast. And if you think about the maximum aperture being f8, you can see that you're going to need some light for this camera to work. Now, the new film by Impossible and then Polaroid Originals, and now just Polaroid. I have a pack of Polaroid Originals black and white here. The ISO has always been a little faster, about ISO of 160, which means that when you put that film in this camera and you shoot with the exposure compensation dial right there at 12 o'clock, it's usually going to overexpose your photograph a little bit. So Polaroid always recommends in the instructions that come in each film pack and on their website that you turn that exposure dial to the first line on the left side of the dial so that you're 1/3 of the way into the black. And that will help keep you from overexposing your photographs a little bit. All right? So now, let's see here. Have I covered everything? Yeah, 1978 is when this camera came out. A little bit over 2 pounds, not too bad. The original SX-70, when you folded it up, it was from here to here. And in fact, there's a video that you can see on YouTube of Edwin Land himself, Dr. Land on stage, demonstrating or announcing the arrival of the SX-70 and the entire concept of a single OneStep instant photography, and he actually has a jacket on, and he pulls the camera out of the pocket on his jacket. They may have modified that pocket just a little bit. Well, with the sonar part of the camera on here, I don't think you're going to be fitting that into any jacket pockets because it's just too big. But they do put a strap on this camera so you can carry it like that. It's not too bad. And they did make cases for it. Now, does it work today if you come across one of these cameras and you're able to get one in good shape like this one? The answer is yes, but you're going to have to experiment, all right? You're going to have to experiment. First of all, the instructions and all the packs will tell you that the new film loves light. You need to be shooting these outdoors in situations where there is plenty of light with the SX-70 camera. Because if you don't, then it's going to slow that shutter speed down and you are going to get blurred photographs no matter what you do. You can put this camera on a tripod, has a tripod mount, whereas I think the original SX-70s did not. But you're still going to get some camera shake by pushing that button, the exposure button there. So make sure you have lots of light. Now, when you have all of that going for you, then you can get some pretty good photographs. This is a photograph of my wife Debbie and me taken with this camera and with Polaroid Originals color film. And I really like that. I'm very happy about that. Not bad. And I don't have any examples to show you, but the black and white film is actually a little bit better quality. Now, problems with the camera. Well, first of all, the problems with the camera are not really problems with the camera. There is one little thing I'll talk about. But the film, today's film, because they had to reverse engineer it and go backwards with it, it's just not the same kind of quality you would get with the original Polaroid if you've been around long enough, or if you have any examples of that film. It's not the same. But it's still worth checking out as long as you're able to deal with two what I consider to be kind of party killers, the potential fun killers of the film. Number one is it takes a lot longer to develop, whereas the original instant film for the SX-70 would develop in about a minute time or so. These new films take longer, the color film longer than the black and white. And to really be fully cured and all the colors present, you're going to be looking at about 20 minutes or so. It should be faster, and maybe someday it will be, but the fun part about instant photography is you take the photo and you hand it to somebody and you say, here, hang on to that, and then a minute later they have an instant memory of that moment. The other problem, and this is something that I think Polaroid has to solve, they just, come on, you got to do this, is the original film for these cameras, when it came out of the camera, there was no shielding necessary. You just took it out of the camera, and you could hold it in your hand. You could give it to somebody and say, just hang on to that. You didn't have to shield it from light, and it would develop just fine. The new film has to be shielded from light. The black and white, less time, I'd say 2-3 minutes or so. The color, maybe 5 minutes or so. So when it comes out, first of all, you can get these pieces of plastic called frog tongues, and they're available from Polaroid, and they show you how to install them into the film slot of your camera so that when your film comes out, this piece of plastic stays over the film for a little bit, over the photo, so it's being shielded from light. And then you can take it and then slip it into your jacket pocket or slip it into the box that you have, the cardboard box, so that you can shield it for the first few moments of its life from sunlight. Come on, Polaroid, you got to fix that. You've had time, fix that problem, because their biggest competitor, as you know, is Fuji Instax, and Fuji Instax does not have that problem. It comes right out, and you don't have to worry about it after that. So with those two problems in mind, the slow speed of the developing And the fact that the film has to be shielded, if you're willing to live with that, then you can have fun with instant photography. Now, we'll say one more thing. The SX-70 SONAR version of the camera has updated electronics over the original SX-70, and the exposure is probably better in this one than it is in the original one. And we're still talking about a camera that's over 40 years old, but if you can find one in working order, the only other thing you need to look out for is, and you can't see it because it's deep inside this camera on its circuit board, but when the light enters this window right here for the exposure meter system, it's deflected down to a sensing device that's underneath a glass lens that senses how much light. And over time, that lens may get hazy or cloudy. And if it does, then your camera may overexpose again. It may think that it doesn't have enough light and it will overexpose. Therefore, if you're going to invest in this system, be prepared to experiment and fail for some shots until you find out exactly how your camera needs to be compensated. And once you do that, I don't see any reason why you shouldn't have, a lot of success with the camera, but you need to learn exactly how your camera works as far as exposure and lighting situations, and you can have some fun. Now, I've got one more photograph to show you, and this was made inside. And if you're going to shoot indoors, you have to have flash with this camera. So you're going to need either the original solution was this bar of of flash bulbs called a flash bar, which I don't have any of those. They're out there in internet land and flea markets and antique stores, but it plugged right into this little plug right here, and you would get 5 flashes, and then you turn around and 5 more flashes for your 10 shots that you used to get on a film pack. Of course, now you get 8. But Polaroid, being an expensive camera, they weren't afraid to make expensive accessories. And so this accessory right here is the Polytonic Flash. And the Polytonic Flash would plug into the top of the camera like that. And the flash bracket that came with it would mount into the tripod socket of the camera, and then you would put this on the mount here on the side like this. If I can get it to go on. And you got to have it just in the right position like that, and then you would turn this to lock it in place. And this would go underneath the camera like this in the tripod socket, and then that plug would go on top, and then you would have a flash taking machine for instant photography. It was really, really cool. Now, these are rare, but nowadays, if you really want to invest in this, you can get the Mint, that's the brand name, Mint SX-70 flash bar to go right here on top. And it knows the ISO of the camera, and it can adjust accordingly. So, the Polaroid SX-70 SONAR OneStep. I am very, very blessed to have this camera. I love taking it to parties, especially outdoor gatherings, and shooting photographs and then handing them to people and saying, here, take this home, it's a souvenir of the day. And it's just kind of a fun thing to do. So if you've got one of these cameras, or if you decide to get into it, then you're going to have some fun with that. And you're preserving this really wonderful piece of technology. Well, that's our Uncle Jonesy's camera of the week. Now, I would really, really love it if you would please click that subscribe button there so you won't miss another show. And if you're liking this video, then you might enjoy our Uncle Jonesy's Cameras podcast, which you can find on all of your favorite podcast sources. And if you'd like to read blogs about photography, please feel free to look at ours. It's called unclejonesyscameras.blogspot.com. And when you put Jonesy's in, we take out the apostrophe, Jonesys, unclejonesyscameras.blogspot.com. Our Facebook page and our Instagram page are at UJC Podcast, UJC Podcast. And if you'd like to write us, you can either just leave comments on the video here, or our email is unclejonesy'scameras@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. All right, well, that's our camera of the week. Next week we'll be back with another camera. Until then, get those old Polaroid cameras out, get some film for them, get out shooting with them. And until then, I'll see you next time. Happy shooting, everybody.